Some words don't fade with time. They don't grow quiet. They don't soften. They sit inside you waiting. You're uneducated. You're useless. You'll never be anything. The day my father said those words to me, he laughed while saying them. Not joking. Not teasing. Like my future was a bad joke. I remember the room. The cracked ceiling fan. The smell of cheap tea cooling in a glass. The way everyone went silent. But no one stopped him. And I remember something else too. The look in his eyes. Not anger. Not disappointment. Certainty. He was certain I was nothing. And what hurt the most wasn't that he said it. It was that he believed it. That day, I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I didn't raise my voice. I just nodded and swallowed the words I wanted to scream. Because sometimes the strongest revenge isn't loud. Sometimes it's patient. And my father had no idea that the son he called worthless was already becoming someone he could never control again. I grew up in a house where respect was measured by degrees. If you studied what my father approved of, you mattered. If you followed his path, you were smart. If you questioned him, you were a failure. My older cousins were engineers, doctors, government officers. Their photos hung proudly on the wall. Mine never did, because my story was different. I didn't fail school. I wasn't lazy. I just didn't fit inside the narrow idea of success my father worshipped. I liked learning on my own, reading late at night, understanding how things worked, business, systems, people. But in his eyes, none of that counted. No degree means no respect, he would say. And the worst part, he didn't just think it. He announced it. At family dinners, at weddings. In front of relatives who smiled politely while judging silently. This one, he'd say, pointing at me, he doesn't study, he just wastes time. I learned early how shame feels when it's served publicly. It doesn't burn. It freezes. The day that changed everything wasn't planned. It was supposed to be a normal family gathering. Everyone was there. Uncles, aunts, cousins with impressive titles. And me, sitting quietly, invisible. Until someone asked the question, "So what is he doing these days?" The room turned toward my father. He smiled, not proudly, not kindly. He chuckled. "Well," he said, waving his hand, "nothing worth mentioning." A few people laughed awkwardly. Then he continued, "He doesn't have education. No proper future. Honestly, I don't know what will become of him." That's when I felt it. That tight pressure in my chest, the heat in my ears. But still, I stayed silent. Until he added the final sentence. "I sometimes think he'll always depend on others. Some people are just born useless." Useless. The word hit harder than a slap. And for the first time, I looked at him, really looked. And I realized something terrifying. He didn't see me as his son. He saw me as a disappointment he was tired of hiding. That night, I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, replaying every word. Not just his. Everyone else's silence. No one defended me. No one corrected him. No one said, "That's your son." That's when the thought crept in. What if they're right? That question is poison. Once it enters your mind, it spreads fast. I started doubting everything. My choices, my intelligence, my worth, and my father. He slept peacefully. Because people who crush others rarely feel the weight of what they do. But I did. And something else happened that night too. For the first time, I stopped wanting his approval. And that's a dangerous moment for someone who built their power on control. There was something my father didn't know. Something no one in that room knew. For years while he mocked me, I was building something quietly. No announcements, no applause. Just work, late nights, failed attempts, lessons learned the hard way. I didn't have a degree, but I had skills. I understood how money moves, how people make decisions, how systems can be built from nothing. And slowly, very slowly, what started as a small idea became income, then stability, then growth. But I kept it hidden. Not because I was ashamed. Because I knew something. The louder you announce your plans, the more people try to stop you. And my father, he had always underestimated silence. People often ask me later, "Why didn't you tell him earlier? Why didn't you prove him wrong right away?" Because revenge isn't about speed. It's about timing. If I told him dismiss it, downplay it, twist it, I needed the truth to hit him when he could no longer deny it. So I smiled, I nodded, I stayed worthless, in his eyes. And every insult became fuel. Every laugh became motivation. Because when someone believes you are nothing, they stop watching you. And that's when you grow the most. Months later, my father received an invitation. A formal one. With my name on it. At first, he thought it was a mistake. Then he read it again. And again. His face changed. Confusion, then irritation, then something close to fear. He looked at me. For the first time in years, he didn't speak. Because the son he called, uneducated and worthless, was about to stand in a place he never imagined I could reach. And this time, I wasn't going to stay silent. While my father was busy telling people I was wasting my life, I was learning something far more important than memorizing books. I was learning how the world really works. Not the version written in textbooks. The version people don't talk about at family dinners. I learned that degrees open doors, but skills keep you inside. I learned that confidence speaks louder than titles, and that silence, when used right, can be powerful. Every morning, I left the house like usual. No big bag, no laptop that looked impressive. To my father, it looked like I was going nowhere. What he didn't see were the hours I spent learning online, testing ideas, failing quietly. Sometimes I made money, sometimes I lost it. But every failure taught me more than his lectures ever did. And the most painful part, I couldn't share any of it. Because in that house, success only mattered if it came in a form my father respected. Anything else was luck or waste of time. So I kept my world small and my dreams big. There's something people don't warn you about. Success, when hidden, can feel isolating. I remember the first time I earned more in a month than my father ever thought I could. I stared at the screen in disbelief. My hands were shaking. I wanted to tell someone, anyone. But when I imagined my father's face, I stopped. Not because I feared his anger. Because I knew he wouldn't believe me. And worse, he wouldn't accept it. To accept my success, he would have to admit he was wrong. And my father never did that, so I celebrated alone. A quiet smile, a deep breath. And then I went back to work. Even as my life changed, his words stayed the same. You should find a real job. You're getting old. What will people say? Every sentence was a reminder that in his eyes, I hadn't moved an inch. One evening, he said something that stuck with me. If I don't push you, you'll stay nothing forever. Push. That's what he called it. Not humiliation, not public shame. Push. That's when I realized something. He wasn't motivating me. He was protecting his own ego. Because if I succeeded without his guidance, his authority would crumble. Then came the email. Simple, formal, an invitation to speak at an event. Industry people, investors, decision makers. My name listed clearly. At first, I thought it was a mistake. Then I laughed, not loudly, softly, because life has a strange sense of timing. The event was public, open, and guess who else was invited? My father, not because of me. Because of his reputation. For years he had built his identity around being the educated one. And now, our worlds were about to collide. I didn't tell him. I didn't warn him. I wanted the truth to arrive without my fingerprints on it. The day the official guest list arrived at home, I was sitting nearby. I watched him scan the names, slowly, confidently, until his finger stopped, his eyebrows tightened, he leaned closer. Then he read it out loud. My name, followed by a title he had never used for me. He laughed. Must be someone else with the same name, he said. But his voice cracked slightly. Just enough for me to notice. Over the next few days, he kept mentioning it, joking about it, mocking the idea. Imagine, he said once, if you were actually important somewhere. Everyone laughed, including me. But my laughter wasn't nervous, it was calm. Because I knew something he didn't. This time, the stage wouldn't belong to him. The day of the event arrived. He dressed carefully. Perfectly pressed clothes, confident posture. The same posture he used when reminding others who he was. I arrived separately. Different entrance. Different role. When he stepped into the hall, he didn't look for me. Why would he? In his mind, I was still at the bottom. Still uneducated. Still worthless. He took his seat. The lights dimmed. The host stepped onto the stage. And then, they announced my name. And my father finally looked up. The room didn't react right away. That's how shock works. For a few seconds, everything stayed still. People were clapping politely, faces turned toward the stage, waiting for the speaker to appear. And then I stood up. Not rushed, not dramatic, just calm. I walked toward the stage like I belonged there. Because I did. I didn't look at my father at first. I didn't need to. I could feel his confusion. That uncomfortable pause, when the brain refuses to accept what the eyes are seeing. The host smiled and spoke again, louder this time. Please welcome our guest speaker. And he repeated my name. Clear, certain. That's when I turned my head, and our eyes met. I had seen my father angry before, disappointed, annoyed. But I had never seen him like this. His confidence drained from his face in seconds. His back, once straight, leaned forward slightly, as if his body was trying to get closer to the truth, hoping it would change. His lips parted. No words came out. Around him, people whispered. Some turned to look at him, others at me. The room was connecting dots he had spent years erasing. I climbed the steps to the stage. Each step felt heavy, not because of fear, but because of memory. Every insult, every laugh, every time he said my name like it was a burden. All of it walked with me. When I reached the stage, the applause grew louder. Not polite anymore. Real. Strong. The kind that fills your chest and makes your throat tight. I stood behind the microphone, took a breath, and for a brief moment, I imagined my younger self. The boy sitting quietly, while his father explained to strangers why he would never succeed. I wished he could see this. Then I spoke. I wasn't supposed to be here, I said calmly. The room went quiet. I wasn't the obvious choice. I don't come from privilege. I don't have the kind of background people usually trust. I paused. But I learned something early. I looked across the audience. Sometimes, when people decide who you are, they stop paying attention to who you're becoming. Some heads nodded. Some people leaned forward. And somewhere in the audience, my father sat frozen. I was told, I continued, that without certain labels I would never matter. My voice stayed steady, that without approval, I would fail. Another pause. So I stopped asking for approval. The room reacted, not loud, but deep. That quiet sound people make when something hits close. I didn't look at my father. I didn't need to. This wasn't confrontation. This was exposure. From the corner of my eye I saw him move. Shift in his seat, cross his arms, uncross them. The man who used to fill rooms with his voice now looked smaller. People around him whispered again. Not mocking. Questioning. Because reputation is powerful until truth walks in uninvited. At the end of my talk, the host stepped forward again. Thank you, he said. And for those who don't know. He smiled. Our speaker here built all of this without traditional support. He gestured toward me. No shortcuts. Then he added, casually. And interestingly, he comes from a family well known for valuing education. The room turned. Not to my father. I felt it before I saw it, that heavy attention. The kind you can't escape. My father stood up, slowly. Everyone noticed. He looked around, realizing something terrifying. For the first time in his life. He didn't control the story, and I was standing right there waiting. Not angry, not smiling, just ready. Because what was coming next wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about truth. And truth doesn't shout, it lets silence do the damage. After the event ended, people surrounded me. Handshakes, compliments, questions. I answered politely, but my mind was elsewhere, because I could feel it. That pull. That unfinished moment hanging in the air. My father didn't come to me right away. He couldn't. Pride doesn't let go that easily. But later, when the hall emptied and the lights dimmed, I heard his voice behind me. Low, careful. Come here. Not a request, a command. The same tone he had used my whole life. But this time, it didn't land the same. We stood in a quiet hallway. No audience, no witnesses, just us. He didn't look at me at first. Instead, he fixed his jacket, cleared his throat. Then finally said, So you planned all this? I frowned slightly. Planned what? He turned sharply. To embarrass me, he said, to make me look small? I almost laughed. Not because it was funny. Because it was familiar. Even now, he was the victim. I didn't invite you, I said calmly. And I didn't say your name on stage. He clenched his jaw. But you knew, he replied. He knew I'd be there. Yes, I said. I knew. He waited for an apology. It never came. You don't understand, he said finally. I pushed you because I wanted the best for you. There it was. The sentence he had hidden behind for years. I was hard on you because the world is hard. He continued. I didn't want you to fail. I looked at him, really looked. And for the first time, I didn't see power. I saw fear. You didn't push me, I said quietly. You dismissed me. He opened my hand. No. I continued. Let me finish. My voice didn't shake. That day when you called me useless in front of everyone. He flinched. You didn't motivate me, I said. You taught me how lonely silence feels. He swallowed. Hard. I didn't know you felt it that way, he said. That sentence hurt more than any insult. Because it meant he never bothered to check. I tried to tell you? I replied. You just never listened. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The hallway felt smaller. Then he asked the question I never expected. Why didn't you tell me you were doing all this? I answered without hesitation. Because you would have tried to control it. That landed. He looked away. I am your father, he said weakly. I have the right to guide you. I nodded. You do, I said. But guidance isn't humiliation. His shoulders dropped slightly. Not fully. But enough. The man who once decided my worth was now unsure of his own words. And that was the moment I realized something important. This wasn't about destroying him. It was about ending the hold he had over me. I didn't succeed to prove you wrong, I said softly. I succeeded so I could finally stop hearing your voice in my head. He looked up. His eyes were wet. Not tears, but close. I needed to know who I was. I continued, without your approval or your disappointment. For the first time, he didn't interrupt. He took a slow breath. Then asked, almost carefully, so what happens now? I met his eyes and answered honestly. That depends on whether you want to know your son or just protect your pride. He didn't reply. Because some questions don't have immediate answers. And as I walked away, I knew one thing for sure. The confrontation wasn't over. It had only changed shape. The days after the event were strange. Too quiet, no shouting, no lectures. No long speeches about respect and reputation. Instead, whispers. Phone calls that stopped when I entered the room. Relatives visiting, casually, but watching closely. Questions wrapped inside smiles. So what exactly do you do? How long has this been going on? We had no idea. They weren't asking me. They were asking him. And for the first time in my life, my father didn't have all the answers ready. Because his favorite story, the one where I was lazy and lost, was falling apart. My father had always been careful about one thing. How he looked to others. He could be harsh at home, but outside. He was respected, educated, admired. People listened when he spoke. But now every compliment he received came with an unspoken question. If your son is capable of all this, why didn't you see it? Why didn't you support him? Why did you talk about him the way you did? No one said it out loud. They didn't need to. The silence asked for them. At home, things changed too. He didn't criticize my schedule anymore. Didn't comment on my work. Sometimes, he watched me from across the room. Not with pride, with confusion. Like he was trying to recognize someone he thought he already knew. One evening, he said quietly, "You seem busy these days." I nodded. That was it. No lecture, no warning. Just a statement. And somehow that silence felt heavier than all his old insults combined. One afternoon, an uncle pulled me aside. I heard what happened, he said gently. You handled it with dignity. I didn't respond right away, because part of me still wasn't used to that word being attached to my name. You know, he added, sometimes parents confuse control with care. That sentence stayed with me. Because it wasn't an attack, it was understanding. Something I had waited years to feel. And somewhere in the house, my father heard that conversation. I know he did. Because later that night, he didn't eat much. I started noticing small things. He spoke less, sat alone more often. The man who once filled every room now seemed unsure where he belonged. One night, I passed by his door and heard him on the phone. I did what I thought was right, he said. His voice was tired. Maybe I was too hard. Too hard, not cruel, not humiliating, just too hard. Even regret has pride. But it was a crack. And cracks let light in. A few days later, he called me into the living room. I sat across from him, the same place where he once listed my failures. He cleared his throat. "I never thought you'd go this far," he said. I weighed thought. He stopped. Thought what? That I'd stay small forever. That his words would become my limits. He didn't finish the sentence. Instead, he stood up and walked away. And in that unfinished thought, I understood something. The hardest battles aren't loud. They happen quietly. Inside people who built their lives on being right. It happened late at night. Those are the hours when people stop performing and start facing themselves. The house was quiet, lights dim, TV off. I was about to head to my room when my father called my name. Not sharply, softly. That alone told me this conversation would be different. "Sit," he said, pointing to the chair across from him. I did. For a moment he just looked at me. Really looked. Not as a problem, not as a disappointment. As a person. "I used to think fear makes people successful," he said slowly. "That if I scared you enough you'd become something." He paused. "I didn't realize it also makes them disappear." That sentence landed hard. Because it was the closest thing to an apology he had ever come to. "I watched you grow quiet," he continued. "And I thought silence meant weakness." His voice lowered. "I didn't know it meant strength." I stayed silent. This wasn't my moment to speak. It was his moment to face himself. He looked down at his hands. Then asked, barely above a whisper, "Did I break you?" I took a deep breath and answered honestly. "You didn't break me," I said, "but you made me believe I was broken." His eyes closed. That was it. The truth he couldn't escape for years. I had imagined this moment. I thought I'd feel victorious, satisfied, powerful. But sitting there, looking at older man carrying regret, I felt something else, relief. "I don't hate you," I said. "I just stopped needing your approval." He nodded slowly, and in that nod, something between us loosened. "I was wrong," he said. 2 words. Simple, heavy. "I thought education was the only path," he continued. He looked up. "I should have listened." That was the apology. Not perfect, not emotional, real, and real was enough. I stood up. Not in anger. In closure. "I didn't come this far to win against you," I said. "I came this far to win myself back." He watched me walk away. This time, he didn't stop me. Because control had finally let go. The days after that night felt lighter. Not perfect, not magically healed, but lighter. The air in the house changed. No more sharp comments. No more silent judgment hanging over breakfast. We didn't suddenly become close. Healing doesn't work like that. But we became respectful. And for us, that was everything. My father began asking questions, not interrogations. Real questions. "What are you working on these days? How does it function? Is it difficult?" He didn't understand everything. But he listened. And listening was something he had never offered me before. Sometimes I caught him telling relatives about me. Not boasting. Just acknowledging. "His doing well," he'd say, simple, but powerful. I realized something important. I didn't need to prove myself anymore. Not to him, not to anyone. The voice that once doubted me had grown quiet. Because it wasn't his voice anymore. It was mine. And mine believed. One evening, we sat together without tension. Tea between us, no lessons, no advice, just silence. Comfortable silence. And in that moment, I understood something deeply. Sometimes the greatest revenge is becoming so whole that the past loses its power. Here's the truth I carry now. Your value is not decided by someone else's fears. People judge what they don't understand. They attack what they can't control. And often, the harshest critics are fighting battles inside themselves. If someone ever calls you uneducated, worthless, or nothing, remember this. They are describing their limits, not yours. You don't owe anyone proof. Just patience, consistency, and belief in yourself. Because one day, without shouting, without revenge, the truth will stand, and silence will speak for you.